Thank you, everyone, for joining us for Women's Week. My name is Kathy Sorensen, and Jennifer Rosen and I will be your hosts for this session. Our second presenter for today is Dr. Janni Pedersen. Dr. Pedersen is the chair of Ashford University's anthropology program, and she joined Ashford in 2012 to teach courses in anthropology and to work closely with associate online faculty. She earned her PhD from the Department of Anthropology at Iowa State University, where she taught courses in both biological and cultural anthropology, as well as in philosophy. Her research interests had focused primarily on primatology as it relates to human evolution. While in Iowa, she conducted research with language-trained bonobos at the Great Ape Institute, or the Great Ape Trust of Iowa. And she's published research on using analytical methods normally reserved for human-to-human conversations and applied them to bonobo-to-human conversation, and has studied the differences between bonobos that are language-trained and those that are not. She also earned an MA from the Department of Philosophy and History of Ideas at the University of Aarhus in Denmark, as well as a BA in philosophy from the University of Aarhus, and I apologize if I slaughtered that pronunciation. So I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Pedersen.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sorensen, for that introduction. I want to thank everyone who's attending and for the people who have put so much work into organizing Women's Week. It has been such a great event this far. And I am excited about presenting some of my thoughts. So this presentation will focus on the evolutionary and historical background for the gender roles that we still see in academia today and in the workplace in general, and that we have been discussing from various perspectives over the last few days. I will actually argue that a better understanding of the actual lack of evolutionary justification for male dominance and the unequal gender roles we see, and an understanding of the social context for the emergence of gender inequality will help give us background for moving beyond, which will provide a benefit to both genders or all genders ultimately. And I want to just point out that when I say male dominance, I'm not referring to any specific man that wants to dominate any specific woman. That's not what we're talking about. We are talking about structural inequalities, a structure where men have, as the one sex, a dominance in terms of economy, social, political decision-making, business, knowledge creation. So that's what I am talking about, and that does not refer to any one individual. So first, let's look a bit about the 21st century university. We now know that more women than male actually obtain undergraduate degrees. We have more female students than males. However, we do have a situation where men seem to advance faster. They dominate tenure at research institutions, and they dominate leadership positions. In academia, we also see a difference in the workplace. For women, women are often expected, women professors are expected to conduct more service work, such as committee work and general departmental functioning. And that, when you're talking about a tenure-track professor, that counts against them, because what counts is really research and publications. Therefore, it takes time away, reduces the chance of getting tenure, and it takes time away from more prestigious research grants. There's also a bias in job placement and salary. We have, we have studies showing that if you change only the name on a CV, same skills, just change the name from a female name to a male name, the one with the male name with the exact same skills and background will be will be given a higher position and a higher salary. So people have sent these CVs out to professors and lab managers, which are some of the positions that undergrads and graduate students use to advance in the academic hierarchy, and consistently women are evaluated lower in a blind test. We also know that student evaluations are biased, including in the online environment. So in general, students give lower scores to women, and they seem to evaluate them on non-essential qualifications such as were they nice enough. Women are supposed to be nicer. They don't, male students and female students even don't like to be corrected by women professors. So we see that bias in student evaluation. It has also been done with just switching names so that you're able to do a bit of a blind test. We also know that sexual harassment is unfortunately not an unlikely occurrence for women, both at conferences and especially in field work. In some disciplines, women have to conduct field work, often in remote locations, or work in laboratory, also sometimes remotely, in order to advance their career. Often you have a male professor who is in charge of this, and both the instances of both male field managers and male professors have subjected female students to sexual harassment, and it has seemed to be a fairly frequent occurrence in that it's not unusual. And again, it's also seen at academic conferences. So we have these issues at the 21st century university. The question is, why the heck is this happening? Why are we there? What is the explanation? So some people will exactly listen to seeing that. It's difficult, male students especially, but it's actually also a study seen in female students. There is an ingrained cultural assumption that it's not okay to be challenged by a woman. So when we look at this as why is this happening, there has been this tendency, as we've also discussed in other presentations in Women's Week, also actually came up earlier today about is there biological difference based on adaptation, based on evolutionary adaptation that would be to say it is in our genes. And what I'm not even going into the misunderstanding what that would mean to be in the genes, but this is being advanced, and we recently saw it with the infamous Google note from an employee at Google who was arguing that women were less biologically skilled in computer technology. In general, what we've seen from previous is that women are seen as less competent, less innovative, less active. Men, there is a group of men who apparently still have a feeling of entitlement to treat women in ways they wouldn't treat men. And institutions can be hesitant to address this. So what is the explanation? It's been argued that it's based on biology, and the very easy to understand explanation, I have put it out here. It has been argued that specific gender roles relate to male hunting far back in our evolutionary history. It's been said that male hunted, then females took care of the children since they were less strong. Males then provisioned females, which made the females stay more at home or in the cave at that time, taking care of the children, and that led to male dominance and male agency, since it would have been the males that had advanced hunting and a lot of other of the human characteristics. This is actually a popular myth. This is the popular myth of the caveman, And if you look at it, you can see that it's basically based on gender roles of white middle-class U.S. residents of the 50s. It has really not been the idea that the male provision and a woman staying at home was only reality in a very short period of time for a specific group of people. We should then ask ourselves, could this also be cultural and historical? Could it be tied to specific forms of societies? To look at that, let's first look at more details about our biological evolutionary history. We can characterize ourselves, Homo sapiens, as a bald, bipedal, African ape with an oversized brain. We are in the genus Homo, or family is Hominidae, and we are in the order Primates. That means that the living primates are our evolutionary cousins. On this evolutionary tree over here, you can see we have, I'm going to point here, Homo sapiens, us, chimpanzees and bonobos. We share the last common, bonobos and chimpanzees share the last common ancestor just over 1 million years ago. Humans shared a common ancestor with chimpanzees and bonobos about 5 to 7 million years ago. Further down, we have our ancestor with the gorillas and down to the orangutan. So this is when the lineage is split apart. When we talk about evolutionary biology and adaptation, if we want to see if a trait comes from our evolutionary history, we would say that, okay, if it's in our evolutionary history, if we shared a trait with bonobos and chimpanzees, we would find it here. Then our ancestor at this spot would also have the trait. Or rather, if all three of us have the trait, this ancestor would likely also have the trait. Same down here. One example here I can say is body hair. You see all these 4 species have body hair. Homo sapiens have not. This means that the ancestor down here likely had full body hair, and then it disappeared in this lineage. So that's how we make evolutionary inferences. If there's no common trait amongst, say, this group of 3 here, we have a hard time saying, based on their behavior, what happened in this ancestor. So let's look at what these different apes, how they behave. What we see is that the female primates and the social organization across the other great apes is really varied. In orangutans, we have mostly solitary individuals, males and females are not involved outside mating. There's a huge degree of sexual dimorphism, and sexual dimorphism has in general been seen as evidence of a male dominance. When we go to bonobos, they're female dominated. They live in large multi-male, multi-female groups, but it's always a female that is in charge of the group. They have reduced sexual dimorphism, so the size difference is not very large, and they are in general quite peaceful. Going to chimpanzees, also sexual dimorphism, though not as great as orangutans. Increased violence compared to bonobos. Male dominance, but interestingly, the males mostly dominate with female support. So they have a hard time running the group if they being in an alpha male, if they don't have the support of females in the group. Some of the dominant females can actually be part of changing power if they gang up or stop supporting an alpha male. They also live in multi-male, multi-female groups. We go over here, gorillas. Large degree of sexual dimorphism. Groups consisting of 1 male and several females, and they are in general very peaceful. So if we look at that and we go back to this tree we have over here, there is no consistency at any of these knots. There's a lot of variety, we see that. Then let's go to human evolution after humans split up from the lineage leading to bonobos and chimpanzees. let's look at Lucy, Australopithecine. Oh yeah, Lisa, the bonobos sure do. The ladies are in charge and they're peaceful. That's why it's my favorite ape. But Lucy showed it's about, that species about 3 million years old. We can infer from fossils that there was some sexual dimorphism, but we cannot make inferences about violence or male dominance. So based on the fossil going back to Lucy, we cannot say that there was a widespread male dominance over females. We simply can't deduce that from this fossil record. Then we look at Homo sapiens, reduced sexual dimorphism, so there is some sexual dimorphism, size difference between human males and females, but it's reduced. We have increased violence compared to bonobos and potentially compared to chimpanzees. However, we will see that that is largely connected to social organization and not so much a species trait. We also will see that we have culturally dependent gender role. We know that gender role vary greatly between human cultures. We also know that Homo sapiens is the one species that has been able to adapt to all climates across the world. And some of those adaptation might also, cultural adaptation might also influence gender roles. So that raises the question, why did we come up with these evolutionary explanation of male dominance, and what do they actually say? Well, a very famous one was Man the Hunter, advanced by Washburn and Lancaster in '68, then reiterated in kind of another framework as Demonic Males by Wrangham in '96. It relies on finding stone tools, and then they came up about the time that the genus Homo originated, a bit before, just after 3 million years ago. We start to see stone tools in the fossil record, and they would say, this is hunting, and then they would say, well, if they are hunting, then they're provisioning females. Well, not necessarily. It was then further supported by observations of male chimpanzee behavior, a kind of gang that also male chimpanzees will hunt smaller mammals. And they will also kind of sometimes gang up in teams to wage war on other groups. So that was then these people put together to have this idea of the male protector and the male provisioner. However, this makes little sense since we do not know who made these stone tools. Actually, the first evidence of chimpanzees hunting with tools came in 2015, and those are female chimpanzees, not males. They use sticks, branches, to basically spear small bush babies in holes in larger trees. It was observed at Fangoli in Senegal. And funny, when this was presented first at a conference, it's a female, Jill Priest is a female researcher who published and observed this first. It was a very large, very important observation, since it really changes our view of human and chimpanzee evolution. But scientists were actually trying to attribute the discovery to the female professor's male field assistant. So that shows a bit even how that a double example of the bias against female researchers. And of course we have the first evidence of non-human primate cultural invention and transmission. Washing potatoes in salty water was actually observed in female Japanese macaques. Those that invented that were not male macaques, it was females. And of course, as we just talked about, bonobos exist too. So man the hunter does not have much to stand on. Let's go to the next one, upward provider, Lovejoy 81, and that has been reiterated many times. The main change here is that it's a focus on bipedalism. Bipedalism is thought to have come across since not due to male hunting, and not male chimpanzees. Sorry, I got off track there by looking at the chat box. Our ancestors did not so much hunt as they gathered, but males became bipedal to carry back gathered food to the females. So thereby males became responsible for bipedalism. However, we have not seen any evidence that male primates, apes or monkeys for that matter, provision females. We also know now that female chimpanzees are from Goldie hunt. We also have evidence from contemporary hunter-gatherer societies that there's actually more calories coming from female gathering than from male hunting. So again, this is a transposition of a specific cultural construct, 50s U.S. gender roles, transposed onto human evolution with shaky evidence to support it. If we look a bit more on Homo sapiens, as I talked about, we have reduced sexual dimorphism. We eat about everything, cultural adaptation to all environments, and we have been hunter-gatherers for most of our history. Only for the last few thousand years did that change. And what we are actually seeing in contemporary hunter-gatherer societies is a significant amount of gender equality. Women have a large economic and social power, just as there are no overwhelming social class in hunter-gatherer society. There is some gender division of labor, but no division of power consistently. So why did this happen? Since we can see it was not necessarily biology, we have seen some human hunter-gatherer societies being much more equal. Why did this happen? We have a world now where male dominance has been prevalent in many cultures. So why did it happen? Well, many would argue it was the Neolithic, or the worst decision ever, as Jared Diamond would put it. Basically, when hunter-gatherers and the early agrarians transitioned into more intense agriculture, they started constructing larger societies around 6,000 years ago. So the first domestication of plant and animals came about 12 to 10,000 years ago. A few thousand years later, it grew into more complex societies. As Jared Diamond would argue, it led to disease, malnutrition, environmental degradation, war, and inequality. Basically the worst decision ever. Here let's just look at gender roles. Sedentism, which is associated with agriculture. Of course, if you're growing stuff, you stay in the same place, else you can't really use it. It leads to accumulation of wealth and goods. Better and more intensive agricultural practices lead to a group of people being able to produce the food needed for a larger group. Thereby, you have some people that don't have to actually engage in food production or food provisioning. Thereby, you also can then engage in other activities, and you can get cities with other activities. However, you also get social classes. Some people own the land, some people own the property, and they accumulate wealth, and thereby they are able to influence ownership of other aspects of the society, and you have social classes emerging. You get large concentration of people in one place. That also makes it more necessary to have a social hierarchy to kind of control the social interactions. In connection with that, it's also thought that the dominance of men over women in the public sphere emerged. It came about. A range of reasons have been brought about. Potentially it has to do with physical strength needed in agricultural work. Thereby, men came to dominate some resources, and women lost their independence. This then got internalized in patriarchal values, and we've seen them then for the next thousands of years in various cultures to various degrees. And we then return to 21st century academia. We have seen this as a cultural construct, seen that it comes from the transition to agriculture. Well, we don't really live in an agricultural society the same way that we did back then, where we live in a knowledge economy, which should bring up the thought, is it really beneficial to keep with these gender roles? Are they suited to our current complex knowledge society? Basically, there's no evidence that it is. In academia, we have the fact that women have not been given the same opportunities for conducting research or promotion. We end up having biased and less effective science. We have, for instance, I showed an example of evolutionary science that is biased because it was men conducting it from a male perspective. And we ended up having men being responsible for both hunting, tools, and bipedalism. So there was actually a book that came out, A Woman That Never Evolved, since apparently women were not part of evolution, of human evolution. We have medicine where the male body was thought to be the human body, and a lot of medicines previously were not properly tested on women. Symptoms were not recognized in women. For example, there's heart attack that is seen differently in women, and that is an example of biased science coming about through women not having a prominent role. We also lose talent and knowledge, of course. In terms of teaching, we end up getting biased and less effective teaching. We end up conveying inaccurate research. We have biased professor evaluations, as we have seen. And we end up having not necessarily the most qualified being promoted or giving more teaching assignments. If it's the presumed best, but not the most effective due to biased evaluations, then the teaching we are giving students is not as efficient and effective as it could be. So this is my take on how a misconception of human evolution and the background for gender inequality is really having an impact on 21st century academia in both teaching and knowledge production. And with that, I say thank you very much, and I will answer questions or comments if anybody has some. Looking here, Kathy brings up that, yeah, the female chimpanzees are also primarily the one teaching offspring to use sticks for termite fishing. And with agriculture, it's true we had an increased rate of pregnancies, and thereby that makes it harder for women to be independent, and it makes them more dependent on having food supplied. Any other comments or thoughts on this? For some weird reason, Lisa, I have not. I just never got to them. I know they are on my list. But for some weird reason, yeah, they should be wonderful books. The Imacopius, exactly. Of must read, I do have the references here on my slides. I think they are great. Some of those can. The good thing about anthropology is that a lot of our readings is awesome. So it's actually, I mean, some things that other people will read for leisure. That's part of my job. It's very awesome. And for watching, there was actually a really great series on PBS about women in history and prehistory, and they traced back to the earliest complex societies, the origins of civilization, and tracing up the origin of female inequality, gender inequality back to them, and through societies up to today. And I recommend that one. I forgot what the name is right now, but it was a really great documentary.
I'd like to thank everyone for joining us for this session, and thank you to Dr. Pedersen for a very fascinating presentation.
Thank you very much for the
opportunity. We hope to see all of you tomorrow.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone.